Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Another Sunday morning, another Florida Gator loss that we're talking about, and another conversation that we have about the future of Florida Gators football. And I think it starts with the Billy Napier era. I think we knew was over after the loss against Texas A&M. Quite frankly, I think you knew it was over after the loss against Miami. I think it's not if, it's when. I think it needs to happen relatively soon because if you continue this stagnant, quite frankly, losing culture for this Florida Gators program, you don't want the narrative and perspective to switch around this program. Though we just talked about this last night. This is a premier job in all of college football. They got to make a change because what you're seeing on the football field, blatantly unacceptable. Now, I want to have two different conversations. One, what we saw last night, I think you would sum it up with just losing culture. This was a Florida team that dominated the football game, went into halftime with a 3-point lead when it probably should have been 17. The players played their absolute tails off. Like there's no question in anybody's mind that this loss falls on the coaching staff. And just when the moment's the biggest, you can tell Billy Napier the moment's too big for him. And that was a risk when you went out and hired him. Like he's never been in these situations as a head coach. He kind of thought it might get better going into year 3. It obviously hasn't. So I think that's pretty clear. Now the conversation is, Dill, it's been a wild college football season in 2024. I think the head coach candidate list has significantly changed since we talked about it 2 weeks ago. So I would love to hear from the Florida fans in terms of what head coaches you are now looking at and saying, that's the guy that I want. We're all putting on our athletic director hat caps. We're all kind of digging in. Dill, I was going to bed just running through names of who I would like to see coach Florida. So I'd love to hear from the Gator fans. Of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot of Florida football over the next couple of weeks and months as they look for a new head coach at some point. Dill, I'll give you the T-box here. Let's start with what we saw against Tennessee. But I think more importantly, let's get into this conversation of what are some intriguing names that Florida might be going after over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, to start off, you look just can't have illegal substitutions on kick.
Again, same stuff.
Again, it's like you saw it last year. It killed Florida last year in games like Kentucky and others, and it happened again. And I think you said it right. It's like they played good enough football to win that game easily. I mean, their players were playing really at a high level, which again hasn't been something you've seen all year because they haven't played great football for the most part. Yesterday night they played great football, and Billy Napier still found a way to kind of put a kibosh on them.
Red zone was absolute disaster. And again, the management of the football game I thought was an absolute disaster. It just seemed like there's no winning culture. Like again, this is a game that Florida has to win 10 times out of 10. This is a Florida team that year 3 under Billy Napier doesn't believe they can win these football games, and quite frankly, just simply aren't winning these football games.
And I do think that's like a little like emblematic of everything that's going on. I think if you look at them not having any real sense on game day of what their operation is, being efficient, being correct in their assumptions, I think it kind of makes you think as a fan, or at least makes you skeptical, like what's going on everywhere else. Because obviously something's broken. It's like you didn't see that stuff from Nick Saban. You don't see it from Kirby Smart at Georgia. Like the little things are always kind of on point. They don't, yeah, you make a bad call here and there as a play caller or whatever. Those things happen. But when it's just routinely, you're not going to get set. You're going to have an illegal substitution, and they just do it game after game after game. I mean, it's broken there. I got to wonder what else is broken.
Yeah, and the worst part is like we knew it was broken. Billy Napier said he'd fix it in the offseason, hasn't fixed it. We could talk more about what happened in the football game. Again, I thought the players, that's a really good Tennessee team. That's a really good Tennessee offense. Still, they had 312 total yards in that football game. They only averaged 4.5 yards per play. This defense came to play. This team had every opportunity to go win that football game. They didn't. I think that falls on Billy Napier. I think we all know that. I don't think it's worth having any more of that conversation. Now, Dill, I think what I think is the more fascinating conversation is you go back 3 weeks ago after that Texas A&M game, we jumped on, talked about coaching candidates that we would like to see in Gainesville. The first name for a lot of Florida fans, for myself included, was Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin now, 2 losses with Ole Miss, 2 losses to teams that they should have won those football games, were significantly more talented than. Has your opinion switched on Lane Kiffin and his head coaching candidacy for the Florida Gators here?
I wouldn't say it's fundamentally switched. I think it maybe is a little bit less of a slam dunk. If I mean,
Me
he'll
too.
obviously take that job at this point. I think there's no question about that. I think maybe you probably do more of an exhaustive search now, but I still think he is the guy. And at the end of the day, I know they lost 2 games that, again, the scary part is if you're Florida is they lost 2 games to teams that they're more talented than I think they should have beaten. I think they played good enough to beat, and a couple things at the end of that game that they let kind of fall by the wayside cost them those 2. And this kind of was the year for Lane Kiffin. Is the excuses are kind of over. Like when he came into Ole Miss, he had to build that team back up. I think to his credit, he's done that. And they're really they have the talent, they have the guys. It is disappointing to see them start off this way with that loaded of a team,
My
though.
my biggest concern is that he has one of the most talented rosters in the SEC. He's lost to 2 teams in the SEC in Kentucky and LSU that they aren't as good as Ole Miss. And if you're looking at a potential new head coach, you want a head coach that is able to maximize the talent on the roster. Look, if Lane Kiffin comes into Florida, there's zero doubt in my mind he's going to crush it on the recruiting trail. He's going to crush it in the transfer portal. This roster for Florida is going to be very talented. My biggest concern now is that, hey, even if you have one of the most talented rosters in the SEC, you're showing at Ole Miss right now that you haven't really been able to maximize it. I mean, that Ole Miss administration has given him every single opportunity to build an elite roster within the SEC, and it hasn't come to fruition. No, I think the caveat here why I could still get behind the Lane Kiffin hire was he doesn't have the opportunity to recruit and stack high school recruiting classes like he would have at Florida. This is a roster that is built through the transfer portal. Every single impact player they have has come through the transfer portal pretty much. What would it look like when Lane Kiffin has a program that he can recruit at a top 5 level in the country with, also supplement that with the transfer portal. You give him 3 to 4 years, you know the talent's going to be good, but now a lot of these guys have been within the program for 3 to 4 years. I do think that Lane Kiffin, it's unequivocally a better job than Ole Miss. I don't think anybody's arguing that. I think that Lane Kiffin's opportunity to recruit the high school ranks at a higher level at Florida certainly could make him a very attractive coach for Florida. Now, I would love to hear because Lane Kiffin, I think, is the most popular name. So, Florida fans, I would love to hear, have you like soured on Lane Kiffin? Because I've soured on him. I still think it'd be a good head coaching hire, but I certainly don't feel as confident in the hire as I did 3 weeks ago when we had this conversation last. Dill, I'll give you another one. And this is a little outlandish. This is a Sunday morning take here. Ryan Day just lost to Oregon. Ryan Day is on the hot seat. There, you had 3 straight losses to Michigan. Now I think they'll beat Michigan this year because Michigan stinks. But there's a reality where if Ryan Day underperforms once again with what I think is probably the most talented roster in football right now, I could very much see Ryan Day potentially being relieved of his duties at Ohio State. And if that is the case, that is a top 5 head football coach that is available on the free agency market, and Florida will be the biggest job that is hiring for a new head coach. If you're a Florida Gator fan, I think that's the dream scenario for the Florida Gators here is Ryan Day in Gainesville to start 2025.
Yeah, because I think you even heard rumors swirling around about A&M probably trying to make a run at him, and obviously, I don't think that was ever going to be particularly feasible. Because if Ryan Day's not fired, he's not leaving Ohio State.
Agreed.
I think you are right. I'm looking. I think that job is like if he doesn't win against Penn State and probably win a couple games in the playoffs, I think there's a really good chance they fire him because at the end of the day, they're really sour about the Michigan situation. Like the fact that Michigan kind of jumped them, if you will, over the last 3 years and kind of put themselves on the map as the bigger program. And I'm not even really saying that happened, but like that is kind of the perception.
Yes.
If they fire him, he's a slam. Like he is the guy. You do what you need to do to get him. Because at the end of the day, he's getting beat up because he's lost some big games, but he is an incredible football
He's
coach.
literally
He
lost like
develops
almost
everybody
single digit
incredible.
games in like 5 years at Ohio State. Like this is one of
Now,
the best.
in fairness, like that, I don't think that's like I don't totally love that argument as like, oh, he doesn't deserve criticism because he certainly does. And when you're
Yes.
at Ohio State, when you're at Florida, when you're at LSU, Alabama, like those type of positions, you need to win those big games, and he hasn't done it. I do think There is that part of me that I don't think he gets his teams playing the best in the big moments because, frankly, I think he's feeling the pressure way too much, and I think that trickling down a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's still an incredible head
Yeah,
football
and
coach.
and the the
Incredible
the
recruiter.
biggest thing for Ryan Day is he knows what it's like. And we've seen a lot of young he's a green head coach. Like he took over a Ferrari and has had a lot of success and hasn't had a ton of success at the big moments, but he knows what it's like to run a program elite in the right way. Like this is an Ohio State team that will consistently. This is a Florida team that, with Ryan Day at the helm, will have a top 3 roster in college football consistently over the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, you want to see Ryan Day win in the bigger moments. There is zero question in my mind. That being said, I do think that Ryan Day will give Florida the opportunity to compete at the highest level every single year, which is just something we haven't seen from Florida over the last couple. And you've seen young head coaches like go through some of those growing pains, but then kind of start to figure it out. And then maybe at their next school, their second stop, it finally
I
clicks.
mean,
And they're starting.
Even Kirby got that shot over a long period. Like that, oh, he can't beat
Great
Alabama
example.
in the SEC. It's like all those sort of things. And then once it clicked, I mean, he became a real war machine. And now look where George's at.
Jim Harbaugh would be. I mean, he's not a young head coach. Like he was a head coach previously, but that happens similar at Michigan. Right? It's like a couple tough losses. But if Ohio State loses their patience and puts him on the market, you have the opportunity to get one of the best head coaches in all of college football running your program. That would be a slam dunk. No, I got another one for you. 3-3 team out on the West Coast, Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley is another one of those young head coaches that's going through some growing pains at USC. The USC fans are done with Lincoln Riley. At least there's a large percentage of the USC fans that want Lincoln Riley out. I think Lincoln Riley is a great head football coach. I don't think you've very similar. You look at Lincoln Riley and say, young coach that has some flaws in terms of how he's running a program. Dill, I think Lincoln Riley started to figure it out. All 3 of his losses were games that arguably they should have won, certainly could have won. It's frustrating to hear Florida fans talk about head coaches that should have, could have, would have won because that's kind of what we've been dealing with the last couple of years. Elite quarterback developer, one of the best offensive minds in college football. I think can recruit, use the transfer portal. I think I'll give you the T box here. Lincoln Riley in Florida in 2025. How are we feeling about that one?
I mean, you would take him. I don't think that's going to be a particularly realistic option, frankly, because I don't really see a world that he gets fired at USC. I don't think that's a
Oh,
program that likes to spend that type of buyout money. I mean, you know the teams like Auburn, A&M, some of those like Southern schools, Texas even, like are very comfortable cutting those checks. I'm not sure USC is going to be comfortable with that. I also think like it is going in the right direction for him. I don't know why you would
it
fire him
is.
if
That's
USC
why
like
I'm so
really
optimistic. But I think they might. I think they might fire him, even though it is going
If
in the
they
right
if they
direction.
fire him, he's kind of a similar conversation. Ryan Day. You look at the other school, like, what are you doing firing him? He's a really really good coach.
And he's won so much football. He missed on a defensive coordinator that cost them a lot of football games over the last couple of years. He crushed it with his defensive, in my opinion, with Dan Lynn. Again, I think that's one of those head coaches that has gone through some growing pains and could potentially really put it together at his next program. You see that all the time. You see head coaches like when you get a really like even hell, Billy Napier. Like Billy Napier 10 years down the road, if he gets another crack at a major program, I could see him potentially having some success after the growing pains that he's gone through. I don't feel as good about Billy Napier having success as I feel about like Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day, but you could still see that. I think at the end of the day, Dale, you want a head coach that's been through it because I think the most frustrating aspect of Billy Napier is it just seems like he has no clue how to run a program of this caliber when you're consistently playing this big of football games. Because when the moment's the biggest, he just seems like he's the smallest. If you're looking at a new head coach, you just took a flyer on Billy Napier coming from the group of 5. I don't think you can do that again. If you're Florida, you're going to be the biggest program in the country hiring a head coach this offseason. Go get one of the best names in all the sport. Any other names? I mean, Coach Drink at Missouri, I think could be a really intriguing one where he's kind of maybe tapped out Missouri's potential. Like this is kind of the season, and it doesn't look like they're going to win a national championship, potentially not even make the college football playoffs. Coach Drink could be a good one. I think he could do really good things at Florida. You said James Franklin. I don't know if he'll be available. But that would be That would be another intriguing name
I'm
too.
not sure he will, and he did sign a big extension, and I think that was because teams like LSU and USC were kicking around the tires
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they were looking for their guy 3 years ago. But if it's feasible, I think he's a coach who I think he might be getting a little restless too, just like Brian Kelly was getting a little restless where it's like, "Can I do it at this school? Can I get over that hump?" Because I mean, he's really
yeah.
talk about bashing your head against the glass ceiling. He's really
That
bashing
would
his head.
be that would be a Brian Kelly situation. Like had a ton of success in Notre Dame. I feel like it'd be Missouri. Coach Drink and James Franklin, very similar conversations where it's like they are very good coaches that feel like they might be tapped out and want to go to a program that is kind of that next step that has the chance to win a national championship, compete at the highest level every single year. There are a lot of good names. I think at the end of the day, if you're
What
Florida,
I'll give you one who I don't think you're gonna like because your whole big school bias, but Kenny Dillingham would be a fascinating one. I think what he did at Oregon, really,
yeah,
really
okay,
incredible. Ultra, ultra good recruiter. He's bringing so much energy to the Arizona State team. You saw like what was I hear? They like lost 3 to 55 to Utah, then come back and kind of beat
yeah,
them up
yeah,
with Cam Rising. I mean, what he's done at Arizona State is ultra impressive. I think he would be an ungodly good recruiter at Florida. They're probably
man.
a top 3 class every year, and he develops quarterbacks and can score points.
34-year-old head coach at Florida. You're right. On the surface,
And
I'm like,
people said it
oh,
like, "Oh, Dan Lanning, he's too young. How is
yeah,
this going to
yeah,
work at
no,
Oregon?"
I
And then
agree.
he
You
comes
got
in and just runs roughshod on everyone.
my. I don't hate it. You know, I love Kenny Dillingham. So you know, like there'd be a part of me that would be very fired up for it, 100%. I think there's also that element where it's like you just swung the bat, took a big risk with Billy
Billy
Napier.
Napier never had the juice of Kenny Dillingham. I don't even know that that's like Billy Napier has the opposite personality. He has no energy. He's like puts you to sleep when
Yeah,
you
no,
listen
no,
to
I
him
agree.
talk.
But what I'm saying is that like that's another example of a head coach that hasn't really been there, done that. And I don't know if well, dude, I would love it. Okay, I'm with it. I'm with Kenny Dillingham too. Add him to the list. Florida fans would love to hear from you guys in terms of that coaching candidate, and then any other coaching candidates as well. Again, we're gonna have this conversation a lot over the next couple of weeks. Let it fly in the comments section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.